Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, my co-host Justin Baker. Justin, how are you today?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
I see your printer is doing fantastic back there.
Oh, this old thing?
Oh, this whole thing. Yes. Straight from the offices of, we won't say where you work. There's a lot of stalkers out there. You know, a lot of people trying to, I get DMs every week. Where does Justin work? I really want to go see him. Can you imagine? I'm sure plenty of people that. Yeah. Okay, so today's show. You know, we're rapidly approaching trade deadline. Like we are here, right? We're what? Two and a few weeks away. I think it's trade deadline's on a Friday, if I remember correctly. I think it's March the 8th. Yes, it is a Friday. So we're I guess we're 2 weeks and 3 days away from that trade deadline day. And, you know, I think there's been a few moves already. We've seen some Calgary Flames dealt, but a lot more left to go. And I think, you know, we want to just take 10 to 12 players that we kind of see as the most significant potential moves here at the deadline. And let's talk about where we think they're going to go, what's already out there as far as some rumors to what teams are interested in. We know, though, that, you know, there's certain teams that seem to be always involved in everything, and their names are just going to be on every single player. And obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs and the New York Rangers are not going to get 12 new players to populate their team. So we'll kind of give our thoughts on where they'll go and if they'll be traded at all. There's a few names on this list that I think, you know, could be their potential trade players, but maybe not. So why don't we start with Calgary Flames? They seem to be the hottest ticket out there right now. And, you know, they still have Tanev and Hanifin and Markstrom are probably the three biggest names that will get potentially moved by the Flames, at least two of those three. What do you think? Where are we going? Let's start with the easy one. Let's start with Tanev because he has the lowest salary of the three, $4.5 million. He's a 34-year-old. He does have a no trade clause, but it limits him to 10 teams. So, and he obviously doesn't have a problem playing in Canada as he's played for freaking every Canadian team. So let's start with Tanev. Where are you thinking?
Yeah, you said the easiest one, right? I think even though he might be the easiest salary to move, he's going to be the hardest to predict just because for me, he's a guy that I think every team could use, right? I mean, for one thing, he's a right-handed shot. Every team wants a right-handed defenseman, it seems, at trade deadline time. So, but I think you'll be happy to hear. For me, I think he's most likely going to end up with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think all the rumors you hear, we've been hearing it for weeks now. I think that is the most likely destination and the one that makes, to me, the most sense.
Yes, because, yeah, obviously the Leafs need D. Although, let's pull it back here. 4 games with no Morgan Riley. The Leafs are 4-0. You know, 2 of those wins coming against the Blues. And it's, I mean, Austin Matthews has gone off. I think he has 8 goals in those 4 games or something like that. He's now up to 49 after today's little afternoon bout against the Blues. Scored number 49. So he's well on his way to definitely having a career year. And I would venture to guess that 70 goals is, I mean, it's very much in reach, and it is crazy to think that somebody could score 70 goals.
Yeah, in this day and age, it's good to see. Boy, I don't think we've seen 70 since what? Brett Hull,
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's the last one to do it. 70,
boy.
What, 70, or he had 85 and 82 or something like that, right?
Yeah, and Teemu Selanne, I mean, those were the days. But
and he was a minus 37 or something. No, actually, I think he was a plus, but it wasn't much of a plus. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Tanev, I mean, I think what we know is they would like a first-round draft pick. And what we also know is the Leafs don't really have many of those on the horizon. So my guess is that they are going, okay, now Toronto does have their 2024. They didn't have they didn't use their 2023 they traded their 2025. They have no second round picks until 2027. So, your 2024 first round pick, especially in a year where things are a little iffy. Like, I don't think we're in the conversation of like the Leafs are absolutely cup contenders. I don't think we're not. We could probably agree that could we see the Leafs getting to the finals if everything went really well for them? Sure. But are they better than the Panthers? No. Are they better than the Bruins? No. Are they better than Tampa? Yeah. I think that's, they're third in that division. And unless I don't think that Chris Tanev takes them and makes them jump the Panthers.
No, not at all. But, I still think, this is a team that could seriously outscore opponents if they get into that kind of battle. And as long as they get some decent goaltending and, whether it's Martin Jones or Samsonov, as long as they get decent goaltending, and I think, this team can just, or Wall.
I think that's ultimately the goal. Although Samsonov has been playing pretty well.
Yeah, they could just go off and score 6-7 goals a game, although that's not a recipe for success in the playoffs.
Or 9,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, we know, Florida, they're phenomenal up and down, but, with Florida, the one thing that I do worry about is, what happens if Bobrovsky reverts back to how he was, a couple seasons ago, right? So that could go downhill for them very quick. And for Boston, we know about their lack of center depth. So if for some reason, Toronto can kind of figure it out a little bit on defense, get a piece like Tanev in there. I mean, they've got the depth up front to outscore almost anybody in the league. And with the addition of Bertuzzi and Domi, I think on that third line, we could, even though it hasn't really generated a lot of regular season success, I think Bertuzzi is just going to shine in the playoffs. So this could be, a recipe for, a Toronto team to maybe make a deep run here.
Yeah, and sometimes it's these years where you're like, I don't know. Those are the year that you finally pop off and you get your couple series wins, and suddenly you're looking at this team totally different. Especially if you go out and you get a Tanev, that really changes your lineup, and you can really shuffle guys around to where they should be. Jake McCabe has had a much better, I'll say, last 25 games as opposed to the first 25 games of the season. He looks a lot more comfortable. Brody hasn't been the absolute disaster that he was in the first 30 games. I think he's kind of come around a little bit. But ultimately, I mean, Tanev would be a huge addition for the Leafs. I mean, Hannafin would be an even bigger addition. I just don't know you want to give up what it would take. And when it comes to Tanev, though, I think what they're waiting on is some team to go, oh, we'll give you our first round pick. Because right now, no one's given a first-round pick for Tanev. Otherwise, he'd be gone already. So we know that teams are probably, like when I look at the Leafs pick futures, what are they offering? They're offering maybe 2 third-round picks, would be my guess. I've heard that it's multiple picks. So maybe it's 2 third-round picks and like a 5th.
Well, the other thing you're going to have to think about too, right? I'm sure a team like Calgary is probably asking about Matthew Nyes, maybe Nick Robertson, right? They're asking, not to say that Toronto's going to give those assets up, but the one thing that I think most people forget about a deal like this is Toronto's going to need a third team to facilitate and take some money, right? Toronto right now is sitting at $1.3 million in terms of cap space at the deadline, and that's not enough to get Tanev's deal done. So to me, they're going to need a third team to step in here. And so teams are going to wait as we get closer to deadline and try to milk a 4th, maybe a 3rd round pick out of Toronto to keep 25% of that contract.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what will have to happen unless they can, unless they move out another roster player, which at this point, a roster player coming off the defense, I guess you do have Klingberg, who's now on LTIR, which does help, but there's not really anybody that you're like, oh, well, we just got to deal that guy. Like there's nobody, there's nobody there who's really going to help other than, it's not like you want to deal a Connor Timmins, who has been, when he's healthy, he's been pretty decent, and he's only a 1.1 million cap hit. You don't want to give up somebody who's cheap and you've been able to kind of make them productive enough to where they
get value out of.
Yeah.
So
that's going to be a tough place to come from. The ideal world is maybe don't sign Ryan Reeves to a 3-year, $1.3 million deal. But you could also bury him. At deadline time, you just go, hey, Ryan, we got to send you down to the minors so that we can recoup your money, and we'll call you back up in the playoffs. That's probably what you're going to do, right? Like he has not been good. He's been fine. Like at times, he provides that little bit of sandpaper that they need, but he's been very ineffective in general. So I think that's a likely move at the deadline. It's the only thing I can think of to get them an extra $1 million, and that would probably do it right there. Like that gets you pretty darn close if you're able to send him down, and all the better if somebody claims him.
All the better.
You love it if somebody's willing to claim him. Okay, all right. So Tanev maybe to the Leafs. Any other team that, let's say he doesn't go to Toronto, what team do you think might be willing to give up a first-round pick for Chris Tanev?
Ooh, might be willing.
Or even the fact that the Leafs don't even have a second-round pick, maybe somebody is willing to give up a second and a third.
I could see a Dallas Star team potentially making a move. I think, they've been wanting to find themselves a right-handed shot defenseman because, let's face it, in an ideal world, you want, right, left on your D pairings. And so move Heiskanen back over to his natural side on the left, right? So if you can find a guy who can play top 4 minutes and give you that production, not necessarily from an offensive production standpoint, but that defensive production. So you don't have to rely on a guy like Ryan Suter to play 25 minutes a night. I think Dallas would be great. They'd be a good fit. I know Thomas Harley has been great this year, but again, he's not a guy that I think they want to rely upon on a top line, situation against the team's best, Connor McDavid's or, Jack Eichel's in the playoffs. So Dallas could be a team I could see step in and potentially give up some assets for this.
And I love that because that would be a very Jim Nill move to make where everybody's talking about, this guy's going to go to Toronto. This guy's going to go to plenty of teams that are maybe a little more like New Jersey, Florida. I've heard Tampa out there for Tanev. All those teams make sense, but it would be a very Dallas move to go, you know what, let's just go grab Chris Tanev and then go win the cup kind of thing. Yeah, it's and Jim Nill has just hit on seemingly everything lately. Look at that Matt Duchene signing, 55 points in 54 games. Dallas is just, they're sneaky good, and they have the sneaky ability to stay relevant for a much longer time than I think we thought they would. Like when they went to the finals in what was that, 2020? COVID year. That it kind of seemed like that might be their last, like that group was starting to age out, Sagan and Ben, and it was like their final thing, kind of like almost like Montreal a little bit was too, where it was, they're going all the way, like ruining guys the rest of their career just to play in the finals, i.e. Shea Weber. And the Dallas Stars they essentially rebuilt a brand new team without ever being bad and constantly being Stanley Cup contenders. And now they're probably better than they were that year.
That's what drafting will do for you.
Yeah. Fantastic. And honestly, if there's one hole that they have, it's that they don't have that super efficient defenseman that just does everything really well. And you can put anyone with them and they're going to do great. It's not like Ryan Suter could be that, maybe was that guy at one point. I don't know that he's that guy anymore. You got to protect him a little bit more. I just think Chris Tanev, you're right. I haven't heard Dallas anywhere near Chris Tanev, but I think that it's a fantastic observation. And it wouldn't surprise me. Like we go to deadline day and all of a sudden Tanev's a Dallas Star and we go, well, of course. It made perfect sense. And they do have, they've got their first and second round pick this year, no third or fourth, but they've got picks in the high rounds. So, maybe that's a second and a third from Dallas. And maybe you just, or Dallas has somebody else that you like who you can build around. So yeah, I like that move. Let's go to stay with the Calgary Flames. Let's go Noah Hannafin, because that's obviously a much bigger move, but a very important player. UFA at the end of the year. Not much difference in terms of salary this year in terms of the cap hit, 4.95, but in terms of the haul, you're going to get a whole lot more for Noah Hannafin, and I don't know that you're making that move without having an extension in place.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, and that's why I think Detroit's the team to beat for this defenseman right now.
Okay, tell me why.
I think it's time for Yzerman to say, you know what, this is your year. I believe in you guys. We're taking that next step, right? And the one thing I think Detroit has lacked, they obviously can score goals, right? They're top 10 in the league as far as goal scoring is concerned, but they have Mo Seider, but they don't have that true top defensive or even top 4 left-handed shot defenseman. Gostisbehere has been great on the power play, but he's a guy you're not rolling out there in your top 4 on even strength, right? They've got Simon Edvinsson coming, but maybe you bring in a guy like Hannafin so you don't have to rush him. You can still put him on your third pairing or put him on your second pairing and let Hannafin and Mo Seider take a bulk of the minutes. And so, Detroit has been bad for a while, so they've got a lot of prospects in the cupboard. So you could dangle out a guy like, Marco Kasper, who, I think, Calgary would love to get a guy who could potentially be a number 2 center for them, maybe next year or even the year after that. So, and then they've got draft picks. So now you could throw a 2025 first in with that, and maybe even go as far as throw a guy like Robbie Fabry in there, right? A guy who just for whatever reason has been good in Detroit, but not great. So he just never seems to find his spot in the lineup. So it'd be an easy guy to just jettison. And Calgary, I think, would be more than willing to take on that kind of money and a guy who they could flip next year for even more assets.
Yeah. And you're right. Detroit has the picks, and I think Marco Kasper would probably be a guy that they would push to get. I don't know that Yzerman's willing to give him up. I don't know that he should, because, you take what maybe we just talked about the Dallas Stars. They did not go out and trade their top prospects, i.e. Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz. They kept those guys around, didn't move them, and lo and behold, they're the stars of the team now. I think that's what you're hoping for in Marco Kasper. But using those picks, if you can kind of now, would you be willing to move an Edvinsson for Noah Hannafin?
No,
maybe not a 1-for-1, but like Edvinsson and a second round pick or something like that for Noah Hannafin. If Hannafin signed for the next 8 years.
No, you know what? I don't think that Detroit they have other good defensive prospects, but not great ones. And Edvinsson is really the only really great defensive prospect they have right now. Now I could be wrong, and there's a few other guys, maybe a William Wallander, right, who could or a Jared McIsaac could turn out to be a really good defensive prospect. But right now Edvinsson he's the cream of the crop, right? And I think he's the one guy you're not parting ways with, or that's almost untouchable. Not necessarily completely untouchable, but he's pretty dang close right now if I'm Detroit.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think, especially even adding Hannafin, the Wings aren't winning the cup. I know it's nice. They're top 10 in scoring in the league. I see them very much as a similar situation to the Seattle Kraken. Obviously far different franchises, but you're looking at a team that is doing a lot of scoring by committee. They've got a lot of nice depth, a lot of second to third line guys sprinkled everywhere in the lineup. And Larkin, fantastic player. DeBrincat's been great. Patrick Kane has brought a new element when he's healthy, but I still see this team as, they're good. I don't think they're going to go get swept in the first round either. They're going to take on probably the Bruins or the Rangers in round 1 is kind of what it looks like if they make the playoffs. And do I see them beating them? No, but I don't see them getting swept. I could see like a 6-game series and maybe them putting a 5 spot up on one of those teams in one of those games. So I don't think that they're in a bad spot. I just don't think that they're ready to take that huge leap and go win a series quite yet against those teams.
No, I agree. And that's why if you're bringing in a guy like Hannafin, right, you want to sign and trade. You want him extended because he is going to be a guy, again, that you want to build around for, that defensive core the next few years.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, final Well, I guess you think Detroit. Any other teams where you think that he might end up? I could see New Jersey. I think that's the one place where I kind of look and go, New Jersey could really use a Noah Hannafin. And I think he wants to go to the U.S. Like that would be my knock on Toronto is that they're another Canadian team, and I think he probably wants to go to the U.S.
Yeah, New Jersey would be a good fit, I think. I mean, again, they could use help, and I like what they have back there, right, between Simone Nemec and Luke Hughes. Those are all great players, but are they playoff ready? I don't know, right? They're not playoff tested, so, Hannafin would be a guy that could bring in that leadership aspect that they maybe lack a little bit.
Yeah. And then, I mean, you get a healthy Dougie Hamilton, and suddenly your defense is one of your strong points.
Yeah.
Huge. You'd have to give up a lot. I'm thinking, are you willing to give up Jeremy Bratt if you're New Jersey? Because that's probably where it's going to have to, you're going to have to take away from that forward group in order to get that done.
Jesper Bratt? Oh, no way.
No?
Oh, no way. No, not at all. Okay. I mean, I could see maybe
I heard his name out there for Hannafin. That's why I bring it up.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I could see them potentially moving off a guy like, I don't know if, Calgary's really going to take any UFAs back in this deal. So you'd have to bring somebody with some term, right? I don't know. Maybe they get crazy and they swing a Timo Meier, right, and get him out of there, because he just doesn't seem to be working out for me in New Jersey.
Nazem Kadri, I feel like they're a lot of the same vibe. Like, here's a guy who never put up huge numbers, put up big numbers one year, and they both have the same vibe to them to me. Like, not quite number one center type of players, but they pretend they are. Like, they're definitely top six forwards, but are they the guys you want leading your team?
Yeah, it's oof. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, last Calgary Flame. Markstrom, do you think he gets moved at the deadline?
I do. I think Jersey is all but set for this one, in my opinion. I think they had a deal in place. They asked Markstrom to waive his no trade clause, and he did, and apparently the deal fell through. Now, I don't know, specific what details were in that, what pieces were going back and forth, but I got to think they figure out a way to get this worked out, because to me, yes, it would be nice if Nico Dawes comes up and is a nice little story, but I'm not counting on any of their goaltenders right now to carry them through the playoffs. And with what you have right now as far as talent up front and on the back end, and with a healthy Hamilton, you got to do something with that goaltending, in my opinion.
He would be huge, and it would be it wouldn't be the first time that the Devils have made a move with the Flames. They did this last offseason. So, and the Devils just seem to get their goalies from Western Canada. I don't know. Corey Schneider came from the Canucks, and that's would be a little trend there. Okay, the Flames. I think we'll see probably guys move before sooner than later. Just they got to get this done and over with. Like, time to call this good. That little stretch where it was like, oh hey, maybe they can make the playoffs is like, guys, they're not going to make the playoffs. This is one of those hey, all the pressure's off. Let's just go have fun. And they had fun for a little bit. And you can't play like that forever. And they're not going to make the playoffs. Time to move on and rebuild here in Calgary, like you already started to do. So Tarasenko with the Ottawa Senators looks like he's moving on. What's a good fit for Tarasenko?
I'll tell you what, I actually considered the Blues for a minute, because they're kind of heating up a little bit, but I think the ideal pick for him would be to see him in the Carolina Hurricanes uniform. I really like the possibility of a Russian first line with Svechnikov and Tarasenko, with Aho centering that line. I think that would just be so much fun to watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, you get some hands with the speed. Tarasenko wouldn't have to be. He doesn't have to play the speed game at all. He kind of go into the corners, and he can be that guy who posts up in front of the net like he does and uses his hands.
Yep.
Good work.
Yep, I like it. And the thing is, too, is, again, Tarasenko's got a no trade clause, so he picks where he wants to go. But I think you could probably get it done with a future first and maybe a mid to late round pick here.
Yeah, I don't know that it takes much more than a first round pick. I mean, if he gets a first round pick at all.
Yeah, I think, as they get closer to the deadline, I think because, again, he's controlling the cards, that could hurt, Ottawa's negotiating power, right, where he wants to go if they want to get anything back from him. So you could potentially see like a second and third round pick, maybe make it, getting moved for a guy like Tarasenko. But, I mean, I think, again, Ottawa doesn't have to do anything.
Full no trade clause, right? Like,
yeah. Ottawa doesn't have to do anything, though. So maybe they just go to him and say, hey, we'll move you where you want to go, but you've got to let us try to squeeze something out of you, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. Probably my guess. I mean, $5 million, you're gonna have to hold on to 2.5 of that. So,
and Carolina could make it work even with the full $5 million if they wanted to.
Yes, that is true.
So that's even less assets they have to give up.
But you're likely, if you're Carolina and you're trading for Tarasenko, it's probably not your only move. And you're probably making.
They're going to look at a goaltender, I think, too, but we'll see.
But, yeah, Tarasenko, I think you're probably in the like 2 second-round picks. I don't know. If it's me, I don't know that I'm trading a first-round pick for Tarasenko. I really don't. I don't think I'm up that. Even if it's 32nd overall, I don't want to give up my. Well, if I win the cup, it's okay. But 30th overall, I just don't think that he's worth giving that up for where he's going to have to slot in your lineup. Like, you look at good teams and you're like, all right, well, what's this going to do? Like, is he really going to play on the top line? Like, yes, it'd be cool, and all Russian first line in Carolina, but is that really where he's going to end up? We don't know. What happens if he ends up on your third line? Are you willing to give up a first round pick for a third liner? Who can hop on the power play? I don't know that I am. Like, I would rather use that first round pick and try and honestly, I'd rather have Tanev than for a first round pick than Tarasenko for a first round.
I don't disagree with you there at all. I guess it just really comes down to, again, what teams can afford to bring on that cap hit, or who's willing to give up that first round pick, right? I mean, is some team going to get desperate enough? Because there are some, we'll talk about a few of them. There's a few wingers out there that still can produce and score a few goals. But maybe everybody's waiting, right, for maybe like a guy like Jake Gensel or even Jordan Eberle, right, to get moved first before they really pull the trigger on a Tarasenko. Yeah,
the Tarasenko is maybe that like B level forward or even C level forward, as opposed to, you're right, like a Jordan Eberle, Jake Gensel. I mean, obviously Jake Gensel, if you can trade for Gensel and sign him to an extension, I mean, that's the money maker right there. That's if you have Hannafin on defense, you've got Gensel on forward.
Yeah.
Well, let's just jump into Gensel then, because if he's the first piece that maybe needs to fall, and it certainly doesn't look like the Penguins are going to make any kind of impact here in the playoffs. It's I don't know if you're the Penguins. And you're Gensel, you got to be looking at this like, I mean, I could re-sign here and probably make the playoffs half the time. Maybe in the next 5 years, you're going to make the playoffs 3 times with this group. Like, you're going to have some years that are better and some years that are worse. And who knows what happens in 2 years. Crosby's still going hard, but is Crosby going to be the best player on the, like, still a top 10 player in the league in a year or two? I think he's pretty quickly moving down that list. Not for any fault of his own, but just, I mean, there's young, new talent coming into the league. He's in his late 30s, and it's just, it's time for other people to kind of take that gauntlet. It doesn't mean that he's not an effective player, but can he be the best player? Should he be the best player on your team anymore if you're going to be a Stanley Cup contender? Probably not.
Well, the other thing is, too, is their prospect cupboards are bare, right? They don't have assets. So is this Gensel move, right, your way if you're management and Kyle Dubas, to say, you know what, let's restock a little bit. Let's get 3 or 4 good pieces out of Gensel and move him, whether he re-signs or, takes an extension, a sign and trade or not. Just move him now, right, to a team that's willing to pay him. Because if I'm Gensel too, right, that's the other thing, again, going back to the prospects coming up, there's not a lot in the cupboards there. So you don't know if you're even going to get any better in the next 3 to 5 years anyways.
Yeah. Well, and let's say Gensel wants to sign. If Jake Gensel wants to sign, I'm signing him. But
sure.
if he's trying to squeeze me for $10 million, I'm not giving Jake Gensel $10 million. We all saw what happened to Jonathan Huberdeau.
Right. I'll give him 8 times 8 and call it good.
Yeah, and I think probably on the open market he could get more. Probably looking at 9.
Maybe 9.
Like,
Yeah.
because you're looking at what did Nylander sign for 11? I don't think you're putting. Where do you go? Gensel, Nylander. Like Nylander's definitely a little notch above, but not too far above Gensel. I think the difference is it seems like Gensel has always played with really good players, whereas Nylander has, but Nylander is also like he's not the one playing with Matthews and Marner all day long. He's playing with all the other guys that they just continually rotate out with them. I mean, hey, good players play with other good players, right? It's not always not a fair thing to say. Well, he plays with other good players. Well, so does Crosby, so does Malkin, so does McDavid. The best player in the world plays with the other best player in the world. So, yeah, I think where do you think Gensel goes? I mean, it's probably the hardest one for me to nail down. Like,
yeah, I agree with you, but. So there was one team, though, that you kind of mentioned it earlier, right? Making a splash. It's kind of his MO. I could see Dallas making a play. And maybe if they do like an extension, a sign and trade, they could move a guy like Ty Dellandrea out to make this happen and make it worth Pittsburgh's, make it worth their while to pull the trigger on this. Wow. And I mean, could you imagine? I mean, again, when Joe Pa's slowly aging out, I mean, whenever that's going to happen, when he's 45, 50 years old, who knows? But now you can slowly put Jake Gensel back up on that top line to fill his spot, and you don't have to really worry about that top line slowing down at all.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. Yeah, that's a great spot. I think you wonder, would Pittsburgh be willing to trade in the division? That would be a big question mark for me. Like, of course, I could see like the Islanders could use a guy like Jake Gensel.
Yes.
Someone who can actually just go, give me the puck. I can shoot it from somewhere on the ice and score. Like, we don't need to grind for every goal. Jake Gensel can actually just score because he has a great shot. Yeah, I just wonder if they would be willing to trade in division. If not, I could also see Gensel being a really good piece in Minnesota, but I don't know that Minnesota can do it right now.
Yeah, that's tough with their cap situation.
So, well, yeah, that one. Give me your percent. Like, what chances do you think that he's dealt at the deadline?
I'll go 35%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think there's a good chance he re-signs in Pittsburgh?
No, I think there's a good chance it just goes to the offseason where they want to keep him because they're just hovering below that playoff bubble, right? And so, of course, keeping him as your trade deadline acquisition if you're Pittsburgh, but it just kind of bombs, they fail, and then we go into the offseason and bye.
Well, that'd be very Kyle Dubas.
Yeah.
Very Kyle Dubas. Okay, let's move right along here to our next UFA. Let's go UC Saros.
Ooh.
His name has been out there. The Predators are, I mean, it's not as if they're so far out of the playoffs by any means, but they have been struggling as of late. Barry Trott's coming out and kind of saying like, we need to be better. Like we need to play this more responsible game. We need to actually come out and try for our fans. I think it's telling, and it does make me wonder, he'd be the biggest get on the Predators, and he would provide a ton of extra assets. He's a UFA in 2 years. He makes $5 million this season and next year. What do you think about UC Saros getting dealt at the deadline?
Oh, I more or less, I'm probably 80% that he's going to get dealt in the offseason versus at the deadline. But the one team that I looked at when you started mentioning it, right? Because whenever I look at trade deadlines, I always typically tend to go like guys from the West are going to end up in the East and vice versa. But I could really see, because of the whole situation, and I don't know what's going on with it, with Carter Hart, I could see
the same
like
thing.
Philly. Yeah. They could squeeze him in, and they could potentially move a guy like Urson back the other way.
Or which Nashville wouldn't be super mad about.
Yeah.
I would wonder though. This would be the difficulty. Well, you're Philadelphia. You're definitely still in a rebuild, even though you're about to make the playoffs. Uh, I think the issue for me would be, well, there's no guarantee that this guy stays past next season. So you would have to get some serious buy-in somehow. Like it's almost better to trade for a guy who's a UFA at the end of the year because you could re-sign him, right? Like you could sign him to an extension, but you can't sign Saros to an extension. And I think that that's actually what's going to hold this up to the offseason as well, is that if you're going to trade for him, you want to know that an extension's in place. If you're going to give up the kind of assets that Nashville is going to be asking for.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be 29 when he's eligible for, to re-sign. So, of course, you could get this guy signed for, a 6-year extension till he's 35 if you wanted to. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think this will probably run into the offseason just because, again, I think it's a big gamble for a guy like UC Saros to make sure that he stays there because you're going to pay a pretty penny. I mean, I know the goaltending market isn't what it used to be, but for guys like that have Vezina trophies and they're clear-cut number ones when you don't have like a number 1B where you're going to do like a Swayman Allmark situation, it's going to cost you a few bucks.
Hey, how about Timo Meier for UC Saros?
I don't know if Barry Trotz is down for that, but
I
I don't know if Timo Meier is the defensive guy that I think Trotz would love to have, but
but I mean, it would solve your goaltending problems real quick maybe what if it was like Timo Meier and a first round pick for Saros?
Oh, I don't think New Jersey would do that.
No?
No, I think there's cheaper options than giving up a roster. I mean, don't get me wrong, Timo Meier hasn't worked out very well, but he's still a serviceable.
You rid yourself of $8.8 million.
Yeah, but does
I don't know that Nashville would want his contract, but I mean, hey, you bring him in, and suddenly you've got a guy who can maybe just needs a different change of scenery. It's just obviously not working in New Jersey, but he's not that far removed from good seasons. I mean, last year, so it'd be an interesting thought. Although I could see a little bit of backlash because he just signed an 8-year deal. And then to try and go and flip the guy is sort of rude. A little, it's a little rude. Like you're not even going to give me 1 year to get my bearings and figure out myself here. Like I don't know. Yeah, like do you want to give up on a Timo Meier that quickly? Would be the other side of it. But hey, for UC Saros, if the Devils had UC Saros, suddenly they're a different team. They're a much different team. It's funny that last year they made the playoffs and their goaltending was good, and we all went, "Oh, see, they're good," and then their goaltending was bad again. So either they have bad goaltending or there's something really wrong with their system because their goalies can't seem to play well in front of this team or behind this team. Just a thought. Speaking of the Devils, a former Devil, Adam Henrique, where do you think he's going? On the Anaheim Ducks, of course.
Oh, I see Colorado overpaying for a guy like this just because they need a second-line center so badly. I mean, Ryan Johansson, I think 2 games ago, got bumped all the way down to the 4th line. So that tells you how much or how well it's working out in Colorado for him right now. So they need somebody to man that second-line center position. They can't find it. And really, because the center market is so bare, they're going to overpay. They're going to at least give up a first-rounder for Adam Henrique.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes. I think you might be able to get away with a 2nd-round pick for Henrique because I don't know that anyone else out there is asking. Like, is anyone else out there saying let's give up a 1st-round pick for Adam Henrique? I don't think so.
I don't know if they're willing to give it up, but if you want Adam Henrique, because he is a guy who can play all 4 positions, he's so good offensively. I mean, not so good offensively, but he's so good defensively and good offensively. He's very good at draws. He's a Swiss Army knife that I think a lot of teams are going to covet, especially guys or teams like maybe Minnesota. You could even see, it wouldn't shock me to see if Tampa Bay or Vegas are in on a guy like him too. But so it might end up being like a bidding war for a guy again, because that center market is so bare.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess if it's me, I'm willing to give up a couple 3rd-round picks for Henrique. That's probably where I stop. And if I'm Colorado, I know Colorado needs help at the center position. Man, it's hard for me to look at Colorado and see a team that's going to win the cup this year. I don't
It's
know.
tough.
I don't like go and trade for Adam Henrique. Are they all of a sudden cup contenders? I don't think so. I think Colorado, they'll make moves. I think the moves that they need to make are going to be much more future moves than a move right now.
Actually, here's the thing, though. They potentially could get Landeskog back in the second round. Say you get Nichushkin back at some point, right, too. All of a sudden, you get 2 top 6 guys. You're bringing Adam Henrique. You figure out your second-line center spot. Now this team doesn't look so bad with that defense, and maybe if Georgiev can figure it out.
Okay. All right. Yeah, they just got to get to the second round. You just got to just got to beat what it's either going to be Dallas or Winnipeg or that's going to be the tough part. You got to beat Hellebuck. And that's not going to be an easy task. Okay. Let's see. Where else can we go? Let's do Jordan Eberle. Because we'll do a couple more. Jordan Eberle, the Seattle Kraken. He's one of the many OGs for the Kraken there, and in the expansion draft, he has a $5.5 million cap hit, and he's a UFA at the end of the year. He does have a no trade clause. He submits a 16-team no trade clause, so that's a pretty sizable. Maybe half the league. Where do you think Jordan Eberle ends up?
I think he's going home to Edmonton. Honestly,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Corey Perry's been a great story, a good signing, but he's not a top line guy, right? I don't want him riding, right side with Leon Draisaitl and McDavid. I want him on that third line with, Warren Foegele or, Matthias Janmark, Sam Gagner, Dylan Holloway. I want him in that bottom 6, right? Because that's where he is most valuable, in my opinion, is to provide that depth scoring where you chip in once every, 2 or 3 games. You get that just timely goal like he did in Tampa. That's where I want him. And I would love to see a guy like Eberle on that top line. He can still skate. He's responsible defensively, and he can still move the puck and shoot. So, I mean, he's due for a raise, so he's not getting extended or he's not going to be there, longer than the season. But I think, he's familiar with the city. He's familiar with the town. It would be a great story. I think they would love to have him back. And I don't think it's going to cost more than, maybe a second-round pick and, maybe a late-round pick with it.
Yeah, I think it would be really Jordan Eberle is one of those moves that any team that's going to walk into the playoff that needs any kind of forward depth should be looking at. It's really the only number that's going to be scary is even half his number is still $2.75 million,
right,
which is a lot for many of these teams to fit under the cap. So you're almost certainly talking about a second team, which still only is going to bring it down to just under 1.4. Which I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot of teams that even that is pushing it, especially if they're going to go out and grab a defenseman, which it seems like any team that's going to contend for the cup always goes out and trades for one defenseman. You just gotta build the cupboards a little more for the defenseman walking into the playoffs because someone's getting hurt. But Jordan Eberle would be a great pickup for any team, and I think you're right. I think you're probably in and around a third, maybe a second round pick. Toss in a 5th to sweeten the deal. But granted, you're going to have to give up that 5th round pick to someone else to take that extra money as well. So I would like the move. I think there's a lot of teams that could use Eberle, the New York Islanders included, which was the team that he left. I don't know if he, is he willing to go back to New York? I would guess that he would be. He had kind of revitalized his career there in New York. So wouldn't be the worst place either for him. Let's do one more.
Ooh.
You want to do what, Anthony Duclair?
Let's do it.
Okay, Anthony Duclair. I mean, it hasn't really hasn't been great there in San Jose, but I think he's probably wishing that he could be on a team that's going to win. After what he experienced in Florida, any chance he goes back to Florida?
There's a slight chance. I'm not, I would maybe put that at like 5%. I think, again, he pairs well with Alexander Barkov, but I think that, they've got a good thing going on right now. And if I'm Florida, I'm not trying to really, upset that forward group too much. Maybe you get a bottom 6 guy, but I think they're more or less focused on defense in Florida.
Maybe
but
a Barabanov over Duclair, yeah.
Yeah.
Although he's a guy, I mean, that's something that you can't write off, is that if you know a guy works in your system, not a horrible get.
True, right? But I think the way he, again, fit with Barkov, right? If you decided that that was the guy you wanted to target, even if you want to bring him in and start him off on your third line, with maybe Anton Lundell or something. If for some reason, right, they, things aren't really going so well in your top line, you can move Duclair up, and he's gonna have quick chemistry with a guy like Barkov.
Yeah.
But for me, I look at Duclair, and I looked exactly to a team that I think needs a right winger more than anybody else, and that's the New York Rangers. They lose Blake Wheeler for the season, right? We don't know, Capo Caco. I'm not sold on him as far as the top six guy is yet. Alex Lafreniere's looked really good with Panarin and Trocheck, so I'm not breaking that up. But, Duclair is a guy who I think can skate and still play. So he could be with, pair up with Kreider and Zibanejad, and maybe finally, find a guy on the right wing that, could play well with that top line. Now, to his credit, Blake Wheeler has looked good, his last, dozen and a half games, but again, he's out for the year. So,
yep.
I don't know if his injury is going to let him come back this, playoff, but I think they have to find something now instead of waiting on it, because a team like Carolina, for example, is going to start creeping up on you pretty quick.
Yep. And not to mention, like, New Jersey's getting healthy again. Like there's some movement happening, and the Rangers, I won't say the Rangers are fortunate to be where they are, because I think they're probably right around where they should be. I think we thought that they would be one of the top two teams in the division, but there are definitely some teams getting healthy in the Metro. So they probably, and other teams that will make moves at the deadline. One more name, because I think that he might be the sneakiest name of them all and might make the biggest difference at deadline for forwards, and that is Vetrano, Frankie Vetrano, Ducks. He's been scoring real well this year on a garbage dumpster fire team. When you talk about the Rangers, there's one more winger. You can't get Duclair. I mean, there's the upside is that there's several of these guys that you could go out and grab, and it would probably be a good fit. So that should drive the cost down a little bit. But I think the thing I like about Vetrano is he is one of those guys who can just score from anywhere. Like, he has the puck, he's got the shot to do it. He's one of the few guys who I'd say is like, he's more of that like specialty middle six type of player. You can play on the third line, you can bump him up and have him play kind of up in your top six, but he really can score from anywhere. And it just takes one shot from him. He's got an elite level shot. And sometimes in the playoffs, that's what you need to win. You get a guy who can just rip one and he scores a few like that. And that's what helps you move on. So Frank Vetrano, any idea where you think he might go?
Yeah, Rangers could be a good fit. I could also see him going back to Florida, right? He spent 5 years there before getting dealt to the Rangers in 21-22. But outside of those two teams, I mean, maybe the New York Islanders, right, take a stab at him. But the nice thing is he's signed for another year, right, at 3.6. So if you get a guy who could put up 50 points, 25 goals for $3.6 million, there's a lot of teams that could, pull a trigger on a guy like this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when it comes to Vetrano, because he's signed into next year, you may be willing to shuffle out a roster player who's not working for you and bring him in, which, not that New York is going to go and give up Capo Caco for Vetrano alone, but maybe there's a Adam Henrique and Vetrano for Capo Caco, and you can bring those two guys in. They're hungry and they provide you with a ton of depth, and you can kind of wash your hand. Maybe you need Anaheim throws in a draft pick as well, but if Anaheim walks away and has a guy who's a former second overall pick and maybe a revitalization project, you might be talking about a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if I'm a team and I can fit them under the cap, and Anaheim, again, they've got pieces to move, but Silverberg would be another really good name. I think he's so good at both ends of the ice. Even though he's not producing offensively, I think he would be somebody else I would take a little peek at too, even though, again, it's kind of pricey as far as
big money. Yeah, you have to get that money knocked off twice for sure. Yeah. But it's doable. Yeah, for a third round pick and for a guy who can kill penalties. If you're a team that's looking for somebody who can kill penalties, he's in that conversation. All right. Well, trade deadline's coming up in 2.5 weeks, so we'll keep on hitting the pavement, finding out more about what's going on with these trades. And as they come out, we'll analyze those as well. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, any final thoughts?
Nope.
All right. Thanks to our listeners for listening, and we will chat with you soon.